Hi, I'm Glen and I'm here with Molly Hull, and today we're going to talk about the Individual Taxpayer Identification Number program requirements. The Internal Revenue Service announced a number of different changes, significant changes in the ITIN application procedures in November of 2012. Isn't that right, Molly?
That's right, Glenn. Actually, the changes that were made last November were simply making permanent changes that the IRS had put out in June of 2012 with some minor modifications. The other important thing that happened with the November announcement is that the validity of the ITINs was limited to 5 years, and this applies to any ITINs that are issued after January 1 of 2013.
I see. So let's back it up a bit and go over some of the basics. Who has to apply for an ITIN and why?
Well, the IRS requires that anybody filing a tax return or claiming treaty benefits have a taxpayer identification number. And this can be a Social Security number or an individual taxpayer identification number. So those individuals that are going to be filing a tax return or claiming treaty benefits and aren't eligible for a Social Security number need to get an individual taxpayer identification number.
Okay, now I understand that people who need ITINs are also subject to very strict documentation requirements, and that they may need to use the services of an IRS authorized certifying acceptance agent, or CAA, or visit an IRS taxpayer service center to satisfy these requirements.
That's right. In order to file your request for an ITIN, you have to attach certain documents, either originals or certified copies of those documents. And for these purposes, certified copy means one that's been actually issued by the foreign government agency that issued the original document. That's fine and good, except that there are many countries that don't even have a process for issuing certified documents. So an alternative method has to be found. One of those is the CAA, or Certified Acceptance Agent, of which KPMG is one, who can interview the applicant, review the original documents, ensure that they're authentic, and provide the individual with a certified copy of those, which they can then attach to their application. This can be done at taxpayer assistance centers also, and the big benefit of this is then the individuals don't have to send their original documents off with their application. A big benefit in case they're just using their passport and they don't want to give that up.
Okay, and what about people outside of the U.S. who are applying for ITINs?
The people outside the U.S. can also go to a CAA located overseas, but more importantly, they can go to a U.S. embassy or consulate and have a U.S. State Department employee located in that embassy or consulate certify their documents.
Now, just backing up a bit to something you mentioned, you said ITIN applicants need to include original or certified copies of documents that provide both proof of their identity as well as their foreign status. Can you elaborate a little bit more on this?
Yeah, you have to attach something that proves that you are who you say you are and that you're actually a foreign person. Now, a passport can satisfy both those requirements, but if you don't want to send your passport off and can't get a certified copy of your passport, you can use two other documents. And the instructions to the Form W-7, which can be found at the IRS website, provides a list of the documents, and those are the only documents that can be used. And again, it can be originals or certified copies.
Okay. And I know that initially only 4 U.S. embassies could certify copies of documents, so the IRS's extension of the number of embassies and consulates permitted to perform those services was really welcome news for cross-border employees as well as their employers. The change went a long way to helping facilitate the filing of the ITIN applications for those applicants who are living abroad, especially for countries that just don't have a document certification process.
Absolutely, Glenn. It was a really big relief for those people overseas, and even families that stayed behind for people assigned to the U.S. and they needed to get these documents. But I do want to remind everyone that you need to call the embassy before you go in to have documents certified, because it may be only available during certain hours, or there may only be certain people that can do it, and you need to make sure that you're going at the appropriate time.
It's been about a year since the new procedures began. Have we learned any lessons?
Well, we've certainly seen that the whole process is a lot more arduous than it used to be, especially for taxpayers who live in countries that don't have a mechanism for certifying documents, and taxpayers that need ITINs for their dependents. Between the need to bring the dependent or child in for an interview when they get documents certified, their reluctance to send off original passports, even for a short time, and the fact that they have to use the U.S. mail for sending these documents back and forth, there are a number of taxpayers that have just decided the value of the deduction on their tax return isn't worth the hassle. But we have learned that the IRS ITIN unit will accept certified documents that were certified up to a year before the processing of the ITIN application began. So that gives people an opportunity to get those documents before they even come to the United States on assignment, rather than having to do it during a business trip or a vacation trip or even trying to do it by mail. The other thing that's still an open item is this 5-year expiration period. There's been no guidance on how an ITIN can be renewed, or if ITINs that were issued prior to January 1, 2013 even need to be renewed.
Interesting. Well, as with many changes, there are definitely some challenges to overcome and some wrinkles to iron out. Nonetheless, people should familiarize themselves with the rules and take proactive steps to make sure that they have the key documentation and they meet the requirements when it comes to time to submit an ITIN application, including, very importantly, getting copies of certified documentation from their dependents. So it's also important before an employee goes on an international assignment that he or she becomes familiar with the rules and procedures, either from his or her employer or from their international tax service provider or global mobility services provider.
Absolutely, Glenn. And this, along with any other tax issues, everybody should be encouraged to contact their KPMG representative with questions or their regular tax service provider.